Chapter 2. The Cardinal was a beautiful ship, a snow-white liner with a slender light blue funnel. She had 2 staterooms, a dining room, and lots of deck space where people could lie about and drink beef tea or play games. "Isn't it lovely?" said Maya, and she imagined herself standing by the rail with the wind in her face as she watched the porpoises play and the white birds wheel and circle overhead. But the beginning of the voyage wasn't at all like that, because after the ship left Lisbon, the Cardinal ran into a storm. Great green waves loomed up like mountains. The ship rolled and shuddered and pitched. Hardly anyone got as far as the dining room, and the doors to the decks were closed so that any passengers still on their legs did not get washed overboard. Maya and Miss Minton shared a cabin with 2 Portuguese ladies who spent their time in their bunks groaning, being sick, praying to the Virgin and begging to die. Maya thought this was going too far, but it is true that being seasick is so awful that people do sometimes wish that the ship would simply sink and put them out of their misery. Maya was not seasick, and nor was Miss Minton. They did not feel exactly hungry, but they managed to get to the dining room, holding on to everything they could find, and to eat some of the soup, which the waiters poured into the bowls fastened onto the table with a special gadget that came out in storms. It is difficult not to feel superior when everyone is being ill and you aren't, and Maya couldn't help being a little bit pleased with herself. This lasted till Miss Minton, hanging onto the saloon rail with her long black arms, said that this would be a good time to start learning Portuguese. "We shall be undisturbed." Maya thought this was a bad idea. "Maybe the twins would teach me. They must speak it if they've been there for so long." "You don't want to arrive in a country unable to make yourself understood. Everyone speaks Portuguese in Brazil. Even the Indians mix it in with their own languages." But the lessons did not go well. Miss Minton had found a book about the family of Senor and Senora Olvidez and their children Pedro and Silvina, who did all the things that people do in phrase books, like losing their luggage and finding a fly in their soup, but fixing their eyes on a page when the boat was heaving made them feel definitely queasy. Trying to read when you are being thrown about is not a good idea. Then, on the second day of the storm, Maya made her way to the main stateroom, where the passengers were supposed to sit and enjoy their drinks and have parties. Miss Minton was helping the Portuguese ladies, and Maya wanted to get out of the way. It was a huge room with red plush sofas screwed to the floor and long gilt-edged mirrors lining the walls, and at first she thought it was empty. Then she saw a boy of about her own age peering into one of the mirrors on the far wall. He had fair hair, long and curly, and was dressed in old-fashioned clothes, velvet knickerbockers, and a belted jacket too short in the sleeves, and when he turned round she saw that he was looking unhappy and afraid. "Are you feeling sick?" she asked him. "No, but I'm getting a spot," he said, pointing to his chin. His voice trembled, and to her amazement, Maya saw that his big blue eyes had filled with tears. "It's not chicken pox," said Maya firmly. "We just had chicken pox at school, and it doesn't look like that." "I know it isn't chicken pox. It's a spot because I'm growing up. There's another one starting on my forehead." He lifted his blonde curls to show Maya, but at that moment the boat tilted violently, and she had to wait till the boy was level with her again to see the small red pimple over his right eye. "And the other day my voice suddenly cracked. It went down a whole octave. If it happens on stage, I'm finished." "Of course, you came with those actors, didn't you? The Pilgrim Players," said Maya. She remembered now seeing a whole crowd of oddly dressed people getting on at Lisbon, talking at the top of their voices and waving their arms. "But surely the spots wouldn't show under your makeup." "I can't wear makeup on my voice. If it cracks in little Lord Fauntleroy, they'll throw me out." "They won't do that," said Maya firmly. "You're a child. People don't throw children out like that." "Oh, don't they?" said the boy. He looked at Maya, her neat expensive clothes, her carefully braided hair. "You don't know what it's like." The boat lurched again, throwing the children against each other, and they struggled towards a sofa fastened to the floor. The boy's name was Clovis King. "It's not my real name. My real name is Jimmy Bates, but they changed it when they adopted me." "Who did? Who adopted you?" "The Goodleys, Mr. and Mrs. Goodley. They own the acting company, and they play most of the leads. Then there's Mrs. Goodley's daughter, Nancy. She is awful, and Mrs. Goodley's sister and Mr. Goodley's nephew. He is the stage manager and does the box office, and old Mrs. Goodley does the costumes, but she can't see too well. They found me when they were on their way to York. I was playing cricket on the village green with my friends, and they said they'd teach me to act and play juvenile leads. You know, all the children's parts, and the page boys and all that, because I had a good voice and could sing and looked right. Didn't your parents mind? I don't have any parents. I was living with my foster mother. She cried and cried when I went, but the Goodleys said it would be a good chance for me. I could make a lot of money and come back rich and famous. But I don't make any money because no one ever gets paid, and we're always in debt, and we just trail about from one awful hot place to another. But isn't it fun, the acting and the travelling? No, it isn't. We stay in beastly hotels full of bedbugs, and the food makes me feel sick. My foster mother used to be a cook in a big house. She made toad in the hole and treacle pudding and custard, and I had a clean vest every day, said Clovis, and once again his eyes filled with tears. We haven't been back to England for 4 years, and if they throw me out, I'll never get back there on my own because I haven't any money. Maya did her best to comfort him, but later, when she was alone with Miss Minton, she said, Could they do that? Could they throw him out? Unlikely, said the governess. It depends on whether they adopted him legally or not. But when the sea became calm again and the passengers came out on deck, they weren't so sure. The Goodleys were not exactly nasty, but they behaved as if no one existed in the world except themselves. Mr. Goodley was tall with a red face, white hair, and a loud braying voice. Mrs. Goodley's hair was dyed a fierce red, and she wore layers of scarves and boas and shawls which got caught in things, and Nancy Goodley, who was 19, simpered and minced and ordered everyone about. As well as the Goodleys, there was an Italian couple, the Santorinis, who did the music and the dancing, and a very old man whose false teeth were so white that one wanted to blink when one looked at them. He's got another set of teeth for when he plays villains. They're yellow with black holes in them, and they're terrifying, whispered Clovis. The first thing Mr. Goodley did, when all the actors had piled onto the deck, was to move away the other passengers, who were trying to read or have a game of quoits. We must be quite undisturbed for at least 2 hours, he said. Then they started doing their acting exercises. Mr. Goodley had invented these, and he was very proud of them. He had even written a book about them, but nobody would publish it. First, everybody threw out their chests and made the air go from the bottom of their spines to their throats in an ah sound. Then they flopped forward and wiggled their shoulders, and one of Mrs. Goodley's scarves came off. After that, they threw their arms out towards the sea and cried, "Merry to the right," while their faces became violently cheerful, and then they threw them in the other direction and cried, "Merry to the left." When they had done merry to the right and merry to the left, they did wretched to the right and wretched to the left, and their faces stopped being cheerful and became extremely sad. Clovis had to join in with the others, but whenever he could, he came over to talk to Maya and Miss Minton and asked them questions about England. Do they still play conkers, he wanted to know, and make a gun on Bonfire Day? And what about snowmen? Has there been a lot of snow? Yes, it was good last year, said Maya. We always run out when the first flakes fall and try to catch them on our tongues. The first snow tastes like nothing else in the world. Clovis agreed, but the thought of tasting things set him off on what he missed most from England, the food. Did you have semolina bake for pudding, the kind with squelchy raisins in it? And what about jam roly-poly and plum duff with cornflour sauce? Maya said yes, they had all those at school, but she couldn't help being sorry for Clovis, who was so homesick for the stodgy puddings she hoped never to eat again. When they had finished their exercises, the company started rehearsing scenes from the plays they were going to do. One of these was the sleepwalking scene from Macbeth. Mrs. Goodley was Lady Macbeth, of course, and Maya thought she was very stirring, tottering about all over the place and muttering, "Out, damned spot," with a terrible leer. So she was rather hurt when Miss Minton, who had been reading, closed her book and got ready to go below. "Don't you like Shakespeare?" asked Maya. Miss Minton gave her a look. "I rank Shakespeare as second only to God," she said, "which is why I am going to my cabin." Clovis didn't have much to do in Macbeth. Mr. Goodley had cut out most of the parts for children, But the next day they rehearsed Little Lord Fauntleroy. Maya had read the book. It was soppy, but a good story all the same, and she thought Clovis acted very well. He was the hero, of course, the little American boy who finds he is the heir to a great castle in England owned by his crusty old grandfather, the Earl. The boy's name was Cedric, and he called his mother Dearest, and together they travelled to England and melted the heart of the Earl and did good to the tenants and were loved by everyone. I thought you were very good, said Maya. It can't be easy to call your mother Dearest. No, it isn't, especially when she's Nancy Goodley who'd pinch you as soon as look at you. And your voice didn't wobble in the least. Clovis looked worried again. It had better not. Beastly Lord Fauntleroy's supposed to be 7 years old. He told Maya that they were staying for 2 weeks in Belém, the first port on the Amazon, and then going on to Manaus. It's a really good theatre there. Usually we wouldn't get a booking in a big place like that, but the ballet company who were going to come had to cancel. We're putting on a matinee of Fauntleroy every day. If it goes well, we might be able to clear our debts. But if not, of course it'll go well, and I'm so glad you're going to play in Manaus, because I'll be able to come and see you. It seemed to her really sad that a boy should have to worry about getting spots, and that he shouldn't be at all excited about travelling to the Amazon. They were sailing into warm waters now. The sun shone day after day, and the sea was a brilliant blue, but Clovis hated the heat. When he wasn't following Maya about and asking her about Yorkshire puddings and apple crumble, he lay under a fan and swatted flies and sighed. I must get back to England, he said, and made them tell him about tobogganing and skating on frozen ponds and muffins afterwards for tea. My foster mother made the best muffins in the world, he said. For Maya, it was quite different. When she was small, her parents had taken her along when they went to dig up ancient ruins in Greece and Egypt. She remembered the happiness of being warm, even at night, and the freedom of the camp. And the closer she got to her destination, the more certain she became that what she had felt there on the ladder in the library was true, and that this new country was for her. I'm going to stay with twins, she told Clovis. Twins are special, don't you think? Like Romulus and Remus, though they were brought up by wolves, of course. If they're nice, it'll be all right, said Clovis, but if they're nasty, you'll have a double dose. They won't be nasty, said Maya. When they had been at sea for nearly 4 weeks, they came on deck one morning to smell not only tar and engine oil and the salt in the wind, but a warm, rich, mouldering smell. The smell not just of land, but of the jungle, and within a few hours they saw a dark line of trees fringed by surf, and then they steamed into the mouth of the river and put down anchor at Belém. It was here that the Pilgrim players left the ship. They disembarked with as many shouts and arm wavings as when they came on board. Maya and Clovis hugged each other. She was really sorry to see him go. She gave him her address at the Carters so that he could come and see her as soon as he arrived in Manaus. The name of the house is Taffarini. That means a place of rest, Miss Minton says, so it's sure to be beautiful, she said. The twins will be excited to see a proper actor. And you'll come and see me in the play? I promise, said Maya. I absolutely promise. Clovis didn't just hug Maya. He hugged Miss Minton too. It struck Maya that though he was afraid of so many things, he didn't seem to be afraid of her fierce-looking governess. The journey down the Amazon was one that Maya never forgot. In places, the river was so wide that she understood why it was called the River Sea, and they sailed between distant lines of trees. But sometimes they made their way between islands, and then on the sandbanks they saw some of the creatures that Maya had read about. Once a litter of capybaras lumbered after their mother, and they were close enough to see their funny snouts and sandy fur. Once they passed a tree whose roots had been killed by the rise of the water, and its bare branches were full of scarlet and blue parakeets, which flew up, screeching, when the boat came past. And once Maya saw a grey log lying in the shallows, which suddenly came to life. "Oh, look," she said, an alligator, my first one!" And a man standing close by nodded and said he was glad that she knew there were no crocodiles in this part of the world. You'd be surprised how many people never learn. They passed plantations of rubber trees and Indian villages with the houses built on stilts to stop them being flooded when the river rose. The Indian children came out onto the landing stage and waved and called out, and Maya waved back and didn't stop till they were out of sight. Sometimes the boat went close enough to the shore for them to pass by old houses owned by the sugar planters or coffee exporters. They could see the verandas with the families taking tea and dogs stretched out in the shade and hanging baskets of scarlet flowers. Will it be like that? Maya kept asking. They're sure to have a veranda, aren't they? Perhaps we can do lessons looking out over the river. She was becoming more and more excited. The colour, the friendly waving Indians, the flashing birds, all delighted her, and she was not troubled by the heat. But at the centre of all her thoughts were the twins. She saw them in white dresses with coloured sashes, like pictures in books, laughing and welcoming and friendly. She imagined them getting ready for bed, brushing each other's hair, and lying in a hammock with a basket full of kittens on their laps, or picking flowers for the house. They'll have a big garden going down to the river, don't you think? She asked Miss Minton. And a boat with a striped awning, probably. I don't really like fishing because of the hooks, but if they showed me, I suppose you can live off the land in a place like that. Since the letter the twins had written to her was only 2 sentences long, Maya was free to make up their lives, and she did this endlessly. I wonder if they've tamed a lot of animals. I should think they would have, wouldn't you? Coatis get very tame, or maybe they'll have a pet monkey, a little capuchin that sits on their shoulders, and a parakeet, she asked Miss Minton, who told her to wait and see and set her another exercise in her Portuguese grammar. But whatever Miss Minton said made no difference. In Maya's head, the twins paddled their boat between giant water lilies, trekked fearlessly through the jungle, and at night played piano duets, sending the music out into the velvet night. They'll know the names of everything too, won't they? Those orange lilies, no one seems to know what they're called, said Maya. The names will be in a book, said Miss Minton quellingly, but she might have spared her breath as Maya wandered further and further into the lives of Gwendolen and Beatrice. They'll shorten their own names, don't you think? Gwen, perhaps, and Beatty. It occurred to Maya that Miss Minton knew quite a lot about the creatures they came across along the river, and when her governess pointed out fresh water dolphins swimming ahead of them, she plucked up courage to ask what had made her decide to come out to the Amazon. Miss Minton stared out over the rails. At first she did not answer, and Maya blushed, feeling she had been impertinent. Then she said, I knew somebody once who came to live out here. He wrote to me once in a while. It made me want to see it for myself. Oh! Maya was pleased. Perhaps Miss Minton had a friend here, and would not be lonely. Is he still here, your friend? The pause this time was longer. No, said Miss Minton. He died. After a week of sailing down the river, they stopped at Santarém, a port where a big market had been set up. The passengers were allowed ashore, and it was now that Maya heard the familiar snap and saw that Miss Minton had opened her large black handbag. Mr. Murray gave me some money for you to spend on the journey. Is there anything you want to buy? Maya's eyes shone. Presents for the twins, and perhaps for Mr. and Mrs. Carter. I should have done it in England, but it was all such a rush. Have I got enough? Yes, said Miss Minton dryly, handing over a packet of notes. She would have been glad to earn in 3 months what Mr. Murray had given Maya, yet she had to admit that Maya seemed to be quite unspoilt. The market was dazzling. There were watermelons bigger than babies, and green bananas and yellow ones, and some that were almost orange. There were piles of nuts heaped on barrows, and pineapples and peppers, and freshly caught fish, and fish that had been dried. There were animals tugging at their ropes, and delicate lacework, and silverware, and woven baskets, and leather bags. And selling them, talking and laughing, were beautiful black women in brilliantly coloured bandanas, and Indians in European clothes, and Indians with painted chests and feathers, and slender Brazilian girls with golden skins. But buying presents for the twins was far from easy, because Maya was sure that what they would really like were some fluffy baby chicks, or a duckling, or even a white mouse. Things that are alive are always the best presents, she said, but Miss Minton was firm. You can't buy them animals till you know what pets they have already. You don't want to get your present eaten on the first day. So Maya bought 2 lace collars for the twins, and an embroidered shawl for Mrs. Carter, and for Mr. Carter a leather wallet with a picture of a jaguar on it. Then she disappeared, and Miss Minton was just getting anxious when she came back, carrying a blue fringed parasol with a carved handle. Because you ruined your umbrella on Henry Hartington, she said, and this would be better for the sun. And you, Maya, what did you get for yourself? but the only thing Maya wanted was a mongrel puppy scratching its fleas in a wicker basket, and once again Miss Minton was firm. "They'll probably have a dog already to guard the house," she said. "Several, I dare say," and Maya had to be content with that. They still had a few days to travel down the brown, leaf-stained river. Then, a few hours before they were due to dock at Manaus, the passengers were called on deck by a loudspeaker and shown a famous sight. They had come to the wedding of the waters, where the brown waters of the Amazon joined the black waters of the River Negro, and they could see the two rivers flowing distinct and side by side. Then, as they steamed up the Negro, Maya saw the green and gold dome of the theatre. She saw church spires and the yellow building of the customs house. They had reached Manaus. They had arrived.